Okay, will you take it down now, please? Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Three Nations Dementia Working Group webinar. And we're all happy to be with you this morning. This morning's theme is writing books with people with dementia. As always, we have a panel to assist with the webinar, and they will introduce themselves shortly. Please note the following about these webinars. We rely on your participation, which includes your comments and responses and questions. You can submit your queries using the text boxes at the bottom of the screen. It's essential to use these text boxes because if you raise your hand, we won't be able to see you. I will monitor the text boxes for any questions, and we will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the session. It's essential to keep in mind that these webinars are created, produced, and presented by individuals living with dementia. While we cannot handle individual queries, we will try to provide guidance through the text boxes and where you can get help. That's really all I have to say, and I will now turn you over to the gentleman who's going to chair the session, Mr. Keith Oliver. Good morning, Keith.
Good morning, Nigel, and thank you for that opening to our webinar this morning. And good morning, everyone. Well, with World Book Day last week, it's great that today it falls to the older generation rather than school children to celebrate the wonder of writing and reading books, something which often challenges not only children, but those of us who are increasingly affected by dementia. Today, I'm delighted to have drawn together a very knowledgeable and widely experienced panel, each of whom will expand upon my brief introductions now. Opening the batting this morning will be Sam Crowe from Open University Press, McGraw-Hill, who will explain his role within the publishing world to support authors writing about dementia in the context of health issues. I am then delighted to be joined by former psychology placement student Ellie Warman to talk about our respective roles in writing a book about life with dementia. Next, we have another double act with my friend and fellow traveller on this dementia pathway, Peter Berry, and his writing partner, Deb Bunt. Staying with people who have dementia and have written books, we welcome back to a webinar panel Dr. Jennifer Butte, who will explain a different narrative about writing a book solo about her life with dementia. Our fifth speaker is Dr. Cathy Charwood from University of Exeter, who along with Rachel Litherland has supported a group of 8 people affected by dementia in contributing to another book based on the ideal study for the OUP book series. Moving finally to our eminent guest, Professor Jan Oyebode, who I'm delighted can join us to speak as an academic author, working closely with people who have dementia, and in this context, one being George Rook, who, due to a prior commitment, cannot be with us today. One friend and Three Nations Dementia Working Group member who is sadly absent from the panel is Wendy Mitchell, who had agreed, along with her writing buddy, Anna Wharton, to join us when I spoke to her a month or so ago. They were the first people I reached out to. Because of Wendy's passing, Anna felt she was not able to join us, and we extend our sincere condolences and love to her and to Sarah and Gemma, Wendy's daughters. A small but growing number of people like Wendy, Jennifer, Peter, and myself have, I feel, bravely published what their lives are like within and beyond their dementias. This really began, I guess, with my Australian friend, Christine Bryden, and her first book, Dancing with Dementia, this one here, published in 2005, and my Texan friend, the late Richard Taylor, who published Alzheimer's from the Inside Out in 2007. Both of those books have inspired me and others. We hope that others will feel supported and encouraged to tell their stories too. That's one of the aims of this webinar. Nigel and I will then take the webinar into Q&A and comments, which please do place in the chat boxes, and they'll be addressed by the panel at the end. That's enough from me for the moment. I'm now going to hand over to Sam.
Thank you, Keith. Hi, everyone. I just want to first say thanks for having me today. I'm super delighted to participate. So I'm Sam Crowe. I am the Executive Commissioning Editor for the Health, Nursing and Social Work portfolio at Open University Press, who are themselves an imprint of McGraw-Hill. In a nutshell, I've been in education publishing for almost 2 decades, and as an editor, it's my job to find out what the market needs are in terms of content in my space and acquire the best placed individuals to create that content, providing them with the tools and the means to get their work published. In the traditional sense, that would have involved signing up authors to write books and then chasing them for manuscripts, and after a few rounds of red pen corrections, publishing a lovely print edition. Of course, in the modern digital landscape, content can be disseminated and accessed via multiple different platforms and methods, but the background processes and functions of a publishing house remain very much the same. In relation to why I'm here today, as Keith mentioned, I work on the Open University Press, or OUP series, Reading into Dementia series, and it's my privileged position to be able to do so. I work alongside our editor-in-chiefs, Dr. Keith Oliver and Professor Dawn Brooker, MBE, as well as the many talented editors, authors and contributors, many of whom are living with the condition of dementia themselves, and together have built this significant collection of resources. So the series itself takes inspiration from Tom Kitwood's revolutionary text, Dementia Reconsidered, and continues in its message in that we seek to tackle contemporary issues and themes in this ever-changing space, as well as reveal what they mean for those within it. The first title published late in 2022, and we are currently sitting on 5 published titles with 3 more coming soon, and all of which really are a testament to the unwavering hard work of its contributors. Central to this series was making our collection accessible, not just to academics, students and professionals working in the field, but to also unpack what the topic in each text means for all those affected by dementia, and in support of those living with the condition. At the very heart of this was ensuring that the voice of dementia was represented, and this is the real core concept of the series. From the covers that are each designed by those living with dementia to the multiple individuals who are contributing content, authoring chapters, and indeed the editors who are in charge of curating the collections themselves living with the condition. So in thinking about this webinar, I couldn't help but be reminded of my university days studying journalism and how we were taught that journalists have the role of being the gatekeepers to knowledge. And because of this privileged position that they have, they ought to report objectively and without bias. And in many ways, publishers have that same privileged role in society, but more in being the gate openers to furthering the field and ensuring that the research and work undertaken by those in each discipline's community creates resources that are not only accurate and relevant, but also as accessible as possible to all those that will find them useful. As a publisher, our role is in bringing content to the market with oversight of the many processes required to bring titles such as these in this series to physical and indeed digital publication. And in this pioneering undertaking, we found ourselves in a very unique position that not many publishers would have found themselves in, where we would be producing content at a significant scale and alongside series contributors living with dementia. As a publisher, we adhere to industry standards as well as internal policy, and this meant that we discovered processes which, while already being complex and unique, were not always fit for purpose or didn't exist at all. For example, the dense copy of our legal paperwork and the contractual requirements within were not the most accessible, and in response to this, we were able to pivot and create new processes that meant that paperwork was more digestible. And how did we achieve this? Well, Open University Press is a small imprint within a large publishing house in McGraw-Hill, and so we are incredibly well placed in that big procedural changes very quickly. We're able to offer intimate support, and this is vitally important as well, to all those involved in the process, as well as being able to channel access to the established knowledge of our legal and contracts departments built up over decades of publishing educational content at the scale of McGraw-Hill. So our standard process has now changed as a direct result of this collaboration. In many ways, the journey of developing this series, one that is still ongoing, has been that of development as a publisher. The titles in the series ask the reader to reflect deeply on their topic, and as a publisher, we have reflected on what we can do to enable our authors and support the community that we seek to provide resources within. Working together, we have been able to seek and forge new processes that lower barriers and increase accessibility, not only for the reader with the end result product, but also in how we work alongside our exceptional authors and contributors, resulting in a more open and accessible space for all those that wish to contribute. That's my piece. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. And it's been great working with you over the last 2 or 3 years on the book series, which, as you quite rightly said, is groundbreaking. And what the book series is seeking to do is to change the dementia landscape of publishing. And I think it's doing that. I think it's doing that through the content of the books, but also, as you quite rightly said, that each of those books will have a cover designed by someone living with dementia. That's not been done before. So now to tell you my story to the audience. My first venture into writing a book was back in 2014, when, as a group of 8 people with dementia, and I noticed Chris Norris is in the audience today, he was one of the 8 as well, alongside 5 very diligent, supportive placement students, 10 years before Ellie did a placement, wrote and published a groundbreaking book called Welcome to Our World. It's this one here. This was the result of a fabulous writing course led by Liz Jennings, an inspirational teacher and a good friend of mine. The book was a compendium of life writing and poetry, which raised over £13,000 for the Alzheimer's Society, who had funded the project from a grant from Lloyds Bank, who supported the society at the time. Having contributed to a book, I decided in 2016 to write solo and published Walk the Walk, Talk the Talk, which told something of my life before and after diagnosis. This again was funded by a grant from the Alzheimer's Society and raised over £7,000 for Deep this time. To help with the book, I again leaned on Liz and another friend from a local university, but also was blessed that over 40 friends contributed their memories of walking and talking with me over the years. Writing a book can be a very solitary and lonely experience, and as a team player, I decided very early on that was how I wanted to write and produce my book. My third book was again very different, in that in 2017, I was approached by, sorry to say this, Sam, one of the other leading publishers in the field, Jessica Kingsley Publishing, to write a book about living with dementia from the perspective of a man, as this hadn't been done before in the UK. I did remind him that this, he said in the world, but actually I did remind him that this applied just to the UK. Again, I gathered around me 2 friends who helped me before and added 2 placement students to help me with typing and organising the book, because that was much harder for me. I was reading a lot of Alan Bennett and C.S. Lewis at the time, and these both influenced what became Dear Alzheimer's, a diary of living with dementia, this one here. Sam has said something about the book series that my next book is part of, and now I'm going to hand over to my friend Ellie to describe her role in supporting both me and Reinhard in this new book.
Thank you, Keith. Hi everyone, I'm Ellie, and last year I graduated with a degree in psychology at the Uni of Kent, but the year prior to that was when I first met Keith. I had the opportunity to work within the KMPT Older Adults Mental Health team in my placement year, and as Keith worked closely with KMPT as a dementia envoy, it was inevitable that we crossed paths. Along with a few other placement students, I supported Keith in a number of events, projects and presentations, which built up a professional relationship between us. However, it was the days spent getting to know each other, usually having a walk and talk or a coffee, which developed this professional relationship into a friendship. It was through this that Keith introduced me to Reinhard and the Talking with Dementia book project, which was still in its fairly early stages. My role was primarily to support Keith and by proxy Reinhard with various aspects of the book. This included making a record of all brainstorming, conversations and topics covered within meetings between Keith, Reinhard and other placement students, participating and offering my own opinions on said topics, as well as analysing themes found in the transcripts of the interviewed 15. After my placement had ended, Keith and Reinhard asked myself and a few other students to continue working on the book. My role evolved in tandem with the progress of the book, and I was able to support Keith in some of the chapters he wrote, which involved transcribing his ideas and concepts into written word, offering aid in researching and providing useful articles relevant to the Kitwood's flower and person-centred care, and even contributing my own thoughts within a couple of the chapters. One of the topics that I talked about, which I want to just mention today, was the multiple facets of collaboration between myself as a student, Keith, a person living with dementia, and Reinhard, a psychologist who specialises in a person-centred dementia and older adults' mental health. We all had different opinions, perspectives, experiences and ideas relating to dementia. And I believe that all of these different angles were tackled within the book, either through written word or the many conversational meetings between us, with which there were many. This intergenerational and multifaceted relationships in which all sides were heard benefited all of us and allowed each of us to see a different perspective relating to our interpretations of Kitwood's flower and person-centred dementia care. This, I feel, was strongly reflected within the book, and it was an honour and a privilege to see some of the opinions and perspectives I had used and acknowledged. I'm so grateful to be part of the Talking with Dementia team and to bear witness to the growth of this project into a wonderful representation of the importance of giving a voice to those that are often unheard. Thank you very much for listening to my perspective, and now I'd like to hand back to Keith.
Thank you for those words of wisdom, Ellie. That was much appreciated. And just to say to the audience that Ellie is now working in the profession of care as well, which I'm delighted about. Well, support is crucial for someone like me to fulfill the high expectations I place upon myself and that maybe sometimes others place upon me. I acknowledge in Talking Dementia those who helped with the book, and the book is dedicated to Ellie and Lara, who gave an immense amount of support, encouragement and commitment to me and to the book, alongside a dedication to the 15 people with dementia who Reinhard and I met with either in person or on Zoom, who talked openly about their lives and honestly through the lens which I call the Kitwood flower. These semi-structured conversations were, as Ellie said, first transcribed and then organised by the students in our team before they handed them to Reinhard and I, who did commentaries upon them from our very different experiences. The book also devotes time to explaining in detail how the book was written. And then, with Professor Ruth Bartlett joining the team, the three each of us took the so what question in looking forward to what the ramifications of what the book said and what is written in the book to bring about improvements in health and social care in the future. Books have a powerful message, and we feel this one has one. By the way, the book is due to be published on the 30th of April and has been generously regarded by academics who have already read it as a landmark book. Let's wait and see. But I'm immensely proud of it, and unlike my previous books, which were written between 6 months and a year, this one took me as the lead author well over 2.5 years in order to do justice to the 15 and to Kitwood and his flower model. Every word in all the books I've written or contributed to have been written by me, with the help of supporters doing the typing. or suggesting ideas that come from my brain. I do not want to work with a ghostwriter, but quite a bit of the books have been the result of sitting down with a friend and supporter and talking about what I want to express and them helping me to write it. Could you put a slide up, please, Amy? This is a slide showing the book cover, which this bloke called Keith Oliver did. And then the other five books in the series, which were inspired by Kitwood's book, which is in the bottom right-hand corner. And you can see there the Kitwood flower that we used as the structure for the conversations with the 15 who contributed to the book. Could you put the next slide on, please? Amy, could you put the next slide on, please? Thank you. And there you can see how hard we did work. There's the group working on the book, which is myself, Reinhard, Laura, and Ellie. It wasn't all work. Some of it was talk, and some of it was coffee and refreshment as well, which always helps the words come more freely. So thank you for that. Take the slide down. I'm now going to hand over to a very dear friend of mine, Peter, and his friend Deb, who are going to talk about their writing partnership, which resulted in this very highly regarded book, Slow Puncture. Over to you.
Thank you, Keith. So what I'm going to do is explain a little bit how we've structured our session, or actually we haven't structured it, how it's going to evolve. Peter's memory is pretty poor, so in order to get answers from him, we've decided to do a kind of little question and answer session. So I'm going to ask Peter a question, and that will prompt him to talk a little bit. And then if he doesn't talk, I'm happy to talk. So, Peter, are you happy with that?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So my first question is really, can you describe our book, Slow Puncture?
Yeah, well, thank you, Keith, and thank you, Deb. Yes. The book Slow Puncture, well, I'm probably one of these people, and probably a very rare person within the context of this, of not actually being able to read the book that has been written about me. It's not so much that I can't read. Well, even I'm finding that a little more difficult now. It's more that I start reading something, and by the time I get a little way down, I've forgotten what I've read, and then I go back to the top, and it becomes extremely frustrating and just difficult for me. So I haven't really read the book, but I know that the book is a sort of a little bit of a switch around. It's about, from what I can recall, I suppose Deb supporting me, but also me supporting her. It's a little bit looking at dementia from her view, learning what she has learned, and I suppose changing her life as well as changing mine. It's become a little bit of a double-way street, really, and that's sort of what I recall about it.
I think that's a pretty good summary, really. So why was it important for your story to be told?
People's perception of dementia in younger people is very different, I think, than to the reality. And I wanted to show the world, as all of us with this condition, I'm sure, want to show the world that people with dementia can still achieve. We can still do things. We still need a sense of purpose. We can still live lives very well. Living well with dementia is something that I focus on. And I want to show people that just because you've had a diagnosis of dementia doesn't mean your life is over. Yes, it's going to be very different, but different is doable. And as my condition progresses, the people around me adjust what they do, and in order to continue to support me so that I can keep doing things. I want to show people, I suppose, really and honestly, that if me, just a normal guy, can live well with this condition, then so can others. Living well can mean many different things. For me, it's cycling around the countryside, but it can be swimming, gardening, walking, writing. It can be just having a coffee with some friends. It doesn't have to be that complicated. And that's what I want to show people.
So it must be odd that you've not read the book that I've written about you and your family. And that always makes me think about the level of trust that our friendship has engendered. So it must be an emotionally odd place to be in, not having read it.
Trust for me has not so much become a memory now as more of a feeling. For the world out there, I know Debs is my friend and I completely trust her, as does my wife Teresa and the rest of my family. But I know very little about Deb's background because it's just not logged in my memory. And I think having this trust as a feeling as opposed to a memory seems to be a very bizarre thing. And I trust Debs entirely. And that support, I think, works both ways as well.
Totally. So what I would want to say about the book and what Peter has provided for me is, I often say this, I don't have many ambitions in life, but I always wanted to be a published writer and didn't have much luck. It was really important when I met Peter, he kind of gave me the muse or the inspiration to fulfill that ambition. And that's a huge thing, but actually huger than that is that I've enabled Peter to share his story and to become known. And I know that the book is helping other people too, and that's a huge thing for me. And I think it demonstrates what an amazing partnership it is. What we didn't anticipate is how it's being picked up in America. And I know many of you know about Authors and how they have endorsed the book and helped publicize it in America. So Peter once said to me he could get to his garden gate, but couldn't push the gate open to access what was beyond. I think between us, he's helped me with my ambition, and I've helped him to push that gate open.
I think you've nearly pushed off the hinges,
well,
I think.
I sometimes don't know my own strengths. And I think that the sort of USP about our book, Slow Puncture, is I don't know many people who cycle hundreds of miles on a penny farthing bicycle. And I think that's what makes the story a little bit more compelling and a little bit more interesting. And I forgot to look at the clock when we started, so I'm not quite sure how much time we've got left. I know you can't get the staff, I know that, Peter. But just in terms of Peter referring to things he can do, as maybe a final thing linked to the book, his next challenge is to cycle 100 miles in one day on his penny farthing bike. Now that may lead to another book.
The idea of the challenge seemed a good idea at the time, but I think the next morning when I sobered up, I thought, I don't know whether it's quite a good idea, but I will do it in June. And that's again just to show people that, you know, people with dementia can achieve things. And I'm a very physical person who achieves things in a very physical way. Keeping the bit from my eyebrows down healthy helps the bit from my eyebrows up. That's just my way of looking at things.
And in some ways, it doesn't matter you haven't read the book, because emotionally you feel the book.
Yes.
And I think that's the important thing. And that's maybe what separates our book from other people's books. I don't know. I'm full of admiration for you, Keith, that you can sit down and edit and write. That's amazing.
Well, thank you, Peter, and thank you, Deb, for your contribution. That was excellent and much enjoyed, I know, by the audience. And just to say, one thing I omitted saying earlier is that the Reading Agency, who are a fabulous charity working in the UK, are preparing a new books on prescription list to be launched during Dementia Action Week. And a number of books that will form on that list are written by people with dementia or people affected by dementia, alongside books written by professional authors and academics. So watch out for that during Dementia Action Week.
We have a vested interest in it, actually. I can't say any more, but we know about it.
Yeah, I can't say any more either. But suffice to say, it's worth looking at when it comes out, and it will be really useful. And it will go out throughout libraries, particularly in England and Wales.
Yeah.
I'm now going to hand over to my dear friend, Dr. Jennifer Butte, who's going to tell us her story of writing. Jennifer.
Thank you, Keith. Well, I met Richard Taylor when I was speaking at a conference at the Excel Centre, and then afterwards I read his book, which Keith has already promoted. Absolutely brilliant. But the reason he wrote the book was because it helped him with his dementia. And I thought that was brilliant. So let's write about things. So I had kept a written record from when I got a diagnosis of how it was for me. And then I read other books, for example, about Still Alice, because being a professional, I was a university lecturer, I was fairly academic and all the rest of it. I identified with so much with Still Alice. So I enjoyed that as well. And Keeper I really enjoyed too, because that had a lot of, you know, academic stuff in it, but a lot of people don't like all that kind of stuff. Anyway, it was when I was speaking at a national conference around the country that I first met Keith. And I was constantly being asked if I had a book, because I believe in living well with dementia. And I believe that we can actually slow down the progression and actually learn again because of neuroplasticity. And I was always being asked if I had a book. No, I'm not going to write a book. There are too many books. But I was chased by book agents, and United agents were very persistent. I said, no. But they said, well, we've actually got a ghostwriter for you. She writes scripts for Casualty. Well, so what? Anyway, she came to meet me, but her mother had dementia, so of course she was the expert. So you can't have a book written by a ghostwriter who knows more about it than you do. It's your book. So I said, no, thank you. So they persisted and sent another one. She apparently wrote scripts for, I don't know, Holby City or something. I don't know. I can't remember now. Or perhaps it was Coronation Street. I can't remember. But she was lovely. And we got on ever so well, really well. And she understood entirely my worldview, you know, how my faith was important and so on. And she started with an outline and produced the first chapter. And then she got ill. And United Agents said, So I thought, oh, well, that's the end of that then, isn't it? And I had read Dementia, Frank and Linda's story. You might have read it or not. And they mention in it, you know, Contented Dementia, I found very helpful, by Oliver James, and Still the Music Plays, you know, which I found very helpful and fascinating to me as, you know, as a doctor, to understand people. So I didn't know the person that had written this book, but I was speaking at a big conference. It was a very big conference, and she was one of the other speakers. So I was very brave. I went up to her and spoke to her and told her how much I appreciated her book. So she said, well, where's your book? So I said, oh, no, I haven't got a book. It's all fallen apart. So she said, well, I'll write your book for you. So I said, well, you can't help me write my book because I've got a 2-year contract. Because United Agents had tied me in that I wasn't allowed to write a book by myself or get anyone else to do it for 2 years. But my ghostwriter was ill, so I had 2 years when I couldn't do anything. So be careful if you tie yourself in with any of these contracts. Anyway, she, meanwhile, spent a year following me up and down the country, giving my lectures, because I was speaking at all the big conferences and all that kind of thing. And because of my background, I was quite well known. And she recorded everything that I said. And also she recorded everything I said on the journeys. She would ask me questions. So I chatted away, and you forgot after a while, you had a microphone on you. So that is why people say the book sounds as if I wrote it. Well, I did in a sense, because it's only what I said, but she recorded it all and organized it, if that makes sense. So the important principle is if you get someone to help you with your writing, like Deb and Peter have shown, you've got to trust them. And they've mentioned that. That is so, so important, because if you don't trust them, or they have a different worldview to yours, it's not going to work. So, I've forgotten where I was now in my book. That's how it goes. Anyway, I had kept a written record. So as she wrote the book with what I said, she also sent it to 3 children to check it for content, for truth, and even for permission, because I wrote about them as well. Those of you who know what I said about my daughter, she said, yes, of course, put that in the book. But you have to get permission if you're talking about other people, don't you? And also it was very helpful because my Louise, who helped me write the book, she didn't sometimes like I said, you've got to put that in. I said, it's my book. And then I would ask my eldest son, who got on very well, he's a diplomat. So he was very able to persuade her to agree with because it was my book, wasn't it? So, and then another thing I didn't realize was how long it took. Now, Keith has illustrated this, how long it takes. I mean, it took 9 months to write this book with this person. That's a long time. Well, I think it is. But the problem after that was that I was not given the proofs to read. So when the first edition came out, those of you academic would understand they got my academic qualifications incorrect. You know, they missed the F out, you know, from the fellowship business. And they put, I mean, it was awful. And anyone who was academic would have thought there's no such, you know, no such qualification as that, and would have discredited the whole book. And then reading the book, there were other mistakes in it too. So why didn't they give the book to me to read with help? I understand Peter Berry on that respect, because I find it ever so difficult to read. I listen to books, but someone could have read it to me. And I could say, well, no, that's not true. I didn't say that. Or they've misunderstood that, or they've printed the wrong word. You know how it goes. That's what proofreaders are for. But their proofreaders were useless. So please make sure, if you have a proofreader with I'm probably talking to Sam, am I? You've got to have the right proofreader who understands the subject and your professional background as well. And then what do we do with the royalties? Well, we don't keep them, do we? Keith gives them to Dementia Society. I don't. I give them to the Great Western Air Ambulance, because they were much involved with my husband when he died, because the doctors wouldn't believe me because I had dementia. So they were brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So they get all my royalties. But after COVID, I was told that the royalties weren't going to be paid anymore on any books that I sold myself, because I sell them at cost price to other people. I don't need to make profit for myself. Oh dear, some publishers. Anyway, never mind. And I was then asked by someone in India if he could translate and promote the book into India, because I worked in India and I had contacts out there. And my publisher said, no way. Now, that was a mistake. I actually accepted that. I shouldn't have done. So last year, was it, when I was speaking at the AGI conference, or presenting on how to get people with advanced dementia to speak, because that's my thing, because I believe you can get anyone with advanced dementia to speak. I do, and I'm living in the community now. Anyway, that's not the subject. And I was met by the General Secretary of the AGI in Asia, and they said they wanted to translate my book into Chinese. So I asked the publisher, no, ha ha. Well, really, because I wanted to help people. I don't get anything from it, but I just want to help people. And I think all of us are saying that, aren't we? So that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. I'm sure what you've said this morning has helped a lot of people, and people who catch this webinar later will, I'm sure, take much from what you've said. One thing that came to my mind is that, in a way, rings a bell with what Peter was saying earlier as well, is I do struggle to read, and particularly I struggle to remember what I've read, but I remember how I felt about what I've read. And that's what's important, really. I read fiction and I can't follow the plot, I can't follow the characters, but I know if I've enjoyed the book or not. And that's all I want to remember, really.
Did I show my book?
Please do. There we go. Nice plug. Thank you. Well, next on our wonderful panel this morning, I'm delighted to welcome my friend Kathy Charwood from the University of Exeter. Over to you, Kathy.
Hello. Right. So I'm going to share my screen because I've got a little PowerPoint, because you've only got me here, but I'm representing a good few people behind this here book. And really my role has been around supporting co-production of a book alongside, as Keith mentioned at the start, Rachel Litherland. So our book will be part of this series that Sam spoke about at the beginning, and it's going to be called Living with Dementia Reconsidered. And we were in the really unique position of being able to work with a co-production group who knew each other really well and had already worked with each other for quite some time. So this is the Always group, Action on Living Well, Asking You. They chose their own name. And so you've got myself and Rachel there, and then it's made up of 4 people living with dementia and 4 carers or former carers of people living with dementia. So we bring different perspectives of living with dementia and how that affects daily life. And we have these very open conversations. So we'd already worked together on producing the Living with Dementia toolkit. And so there was quite a level of trust there. And they also knew the Ideal programme quite well. So a very brief overview of Ideal, which ran from 2014. So we were very fortunate, again, to have such a long-running programme of research around living with dementia, because generally it's not an area that's funded to the tune of other types of research. So we were very, very fortunate to be able to work with the research information from over 1,500 people living with dementia and over 1,300 carers, and following people over time to try and understand what changes and what people need as those changes happen. And alongside that, we also did arts-based projects. We ended up producing a film and a play and an opera, which really we never signed up for originally. So a really varied set of research, and had this enormous amount of research that we wanted to communicate with people. And so the book is really the kind of the broad story of Ideal, and we had a lot to cover. So with our co-production group, with the Always group, we did various things, and we're still going. So really importantly, discussing the different chapters and kind of giving chapter leads a bit of a steer of how people with lived experience feel about this topic, ways to bring out the research findings that would work for a non-academic audience, because this is crucial and it's something that academics struggle with a lot. We reworked chapter titles. So for instance, I can remember that originally the chapter looking at the evidence on physical health had staying active in the title. And one of our members pointed out that felt a bit exclusionary, because, you know, often people might be immobile for reasons other than dementia and find it really difficult to stay active, but they still have they still want to read about their health and feel included. So that chapter ended up being called Health Matters, Comfort and Discomfort, bringing in that Pitwoodian term of comfort, but also nicely playing on the idea that health matters, both the things that might matter to you, but also our whole health matters to us. They produced the chapter template for the academics. So each chapter lead was issued with the Always group's chapter template to guide them. And while I think I can remember Julia thinking, oh, are we being a bit previous? And I said, no, you have no idea how grateful our chapter leads are to have a template to work from, because there is nothing so harsh looking as a blank canvas. So that really, really helped. And we really genuinely gave our group chapters to read and allowed them to give constructive criticism to our academics that they then had to incorporate. And there were a variety of ways of doing that. Some people, they were happy to read on screen. They wanted to use the comment function. They were quite into their Microsoft Word. That's fine. For other people, we printed it out and made excellent use of the Royal Mail, sending these chapters around the country. For some people, once they had read them, rather than email back or provide notes, they wanted to have a chat, and then we would feed back to the academics. So lots of flexibility over how to do that, really, really important. A very fun moment was creating the cover art. So Julia and Jackie, between them, again, making great use of the post, at a distance, created this artwork between them by sharing different things and sending them back and forwards. And then we all have been voting on the final design. And co-creating a manifesto for change. So what we worked out was that we have all of these different areas that we want to talk about in the book, and that the best way to get this across is to turn it into a manifesto. So each chapter ends with a manifesto point. And so really I wanted to share kind of us in action, because it really has been a group effort. And we had the wonderful opportunity to meet in London and actually really thrash out the manifesto points. You can see one of them here. And so just in terms of what it took to try and support co-production, cooperation, a lot of honest and open discussion, and that includes disagreements. So allowing people to voice dissent, understanding why that's the case, and working out where we'll go from there. This leads to the next point, voting. So we did a lot of voting to get us to where we kind of wanted to be. It requires a listening ear from the academics. So being willing to take on board that feedback, to say, look, this part, I just got really lost. I don't think people will follow you here. Or what would help this part would be to have an example of somebody's real life. And actually that feedback again was really valued, because when you are writing and you're an academic, it can feel quite lonely. You can feel quite, you can't see the wood for the trees. So I think that was really, really helpful. Always more discussion. And then in preparing for this, I was really thinking about what it was that brought us together and made it work. And I'm going to leave you with the idea that for a co-production with a group, it's being able to create, and I credit Rachel Litherland with this entirely, a space for being somber and a group to giggle with. It's both of those at all times. So yes, thank you very much.
Well, sincere thanks to you, Kathy. And what was going through my mind listening to your fascinating talk there was that it's great to have Sam in the audience today or on the panel to hear how the ideal book is being written and how it's a fabulous example of co-production. I don't think there's ever been anything better than that that I've come across in co-producing a book of this sort. Next, I'm going to hand over with great pleasure to Professor Jan Oyebode, who's going to tell us about writing books from her perspective.
Thank you, Keith. It's been really fascinating listening to what everyone's had to say. I think what I have to say is a type of variant on what Kathy's just said, because obviously I'm coming to this as someone who's currently a professor in a university. And I'm going to talk about my work with George Rook. The two of us have been co-editors of a volume that Keith's currently reading and reviewing. Keith suggested I say something about, my past experience. And I suppose my past experience of writing is mainly chapters in books, great big tomes like this sort of thing. And they have mainly been chapters for other academics, summarizing the huge amount of knowledge in the field so that an academic can turn to a book chapter rather than having to go to all the original sources. Or they've been chapters for professionals to pick up and use, get off their shelf when they're seeing someone maybe living with young onset dementia and they want to remind themselves of some of the evidence base that they should be working from. So I haven't, apart from articles, I haven't written before for people living with dementia themselves. And our brief with the books in the Reconsidering Dementia series is really broad. They're supposed to appeal to academics, to researchers, to professionals and people living with dementia and families. So it's a massive brief. And I had in mind, how do I write a book that's going to be useful to all those audiences and helpful to all those audiences? So early on, Keith suggested that it would really add to the richness of the book to co-edit with someone living with dementia. And I went to my good friend, Wendy, and said, Wendy, what do you think? Would you have time to do this with me? She didn't have time, but she suggested George. And so George and I'd already done the proposal, but following the proposal, George and I have worked closely together throughout. We didn't know each other beforehand, and picking up points other people have made, we needed to develop a bit of knowledge of each other and develop that trusting relationship to be able to work together. And I suppose we were both feeling our way as we went along because neither of us had edited books before. And a couple of the things that I've learnt, which I think would be valuable for anyone who's thinking of co-editing, are there's a lot of labour involved. I think Jennifer said, I had no idea that in addition to getting people to write chapters and feeding back to them, that we'd also need to deal with permissions, we'd need to produce an index, we'd even have to work out how to merge all the chapters into one document, that we'd have to deal with referencing. So there's a lot involved other than the heart of the book. And I think with a pair where you've got one person living with dementia and one person who's an academic, it's a sort of reasonable division of labour for the academic to take on quite a lot of the donkey work, the leg work, and for the person with living with dementia to concentrate most of their energies on the actual content and the way it's conveyed and the value of it to the readership. At the heart of what George and I did together was our work to get a broader view from other people living with young onset dementia and ensure that was taken into account in the book. And then also for us jointly to read and compare notes on every single chapter and think about how we wanted the authors to refine their chapter and improve the messages that they were sending across. So when the draft chapters started to come in, we had quite an intensive period. We met every week or every fortnight, and every time we met, we reviewed a different 1 or 2 chapters, and we'd read them ourselves and we compared notes. We wanted the book to express things clearly, but not to dumb things down. And we wanted people to think about why they were saying what they said, so that we always had the so what in there, because people aren't necessarily interested in a complex model unless there's some reason for it. Why are you putting that model in there? So when we met and discussed the chapters, we would agree our key points of feedback, and then I'd try and phrase a constructive and tactful email back to the chapter author to get their next draft. And as I say, that was quite intensive. But the other aspect that I'll just mention briefly was about getting the breadth of view of people living with young onset dementia into the book. So our book on young onset dementia is structured around 3 sections, and each section is aimed at reflecting a key need that people living with young onset dementia might have, drawn from our previous research study, the Angela Project, which Keith knows because he was very involved. So we have a section on autonomy, maintaining control over your life. We have a section on maintaining your identity through occupation and engagement and keeping your health as good as it can be. And we have a section on maintaining connections, wider connections. And our original idea was that when the chapters for each of those sections had been written, we would summarize them for a group of people living with young onset dementia, and we would ask for their commentary, and we would write up a short commentary of the words of people living with dementia at the end of that section. And George was really, he made a suggestion that was different, which we followed. And I was so pleased to be working with him because I felt I would never have thought of it. I don't know why. What he said is, we don't want the chapters, the authors to write the chapters and then consult people with young onset dementia. We want people with young onset dementia to influence before the chapter authors start writing. So with the tremendous support of Rachel Niblock from Deep, we set up some online discussions with people living with young onset dementia. And we invited all the chapter authors to come and listen to the discussion. So we just opened the topic of one of the sections, and between us, people discussed what this meant to them. And then at the very end, we opened it up to the chapter authors, and they could ask people some questions. And not all chapter authors came, but quite a lot made the effort to come, including people in Canada who were in a different time zone from the UK. And several chapter authors told us what a big difference it made to have heard directly from people living with young onset dementia before they started. And I suppose I realised, because I came from a background working in clinical psychology and spent most of my career talking with people living with dementia day in, day out, I'd sort of almost forgotten that quite a lot of people who go into academia don't have that opportunity. And so for people to have that chance for a direct conversation was very valuable to them. And then George said, let's not have sections at the end because we're going to undermine the authors. They've made their statements as experts in their area. They've been informed by what people with young onset dementia think. And if we then do a commentary, we're really maybe undermining what they say and taking away its authority. So let's let them stand as authorities. And so that's what we did. And the book that's gone to Keith for review is in that format. So I suppose overall, I would say it's been a good model to work jointly. one person with ongoing lived experience and one person with academic and clinical experience. And that developing that partnership of trust, and looking at the value of the way, well, looking at things being expressed clearly and with the so what in mind, has been something that came from that joint working, and we hope it'll make a better book of value to a wide set of audiences. So that's me, Keith.
Well, thank you very much, Jan, for that. That was really interesting, and it will help me in my role within the book series as well, in helping edit the book. So that brings to a close this part of our webinar this morning, which was designed to be by people with dementia, with people with dementia, and for people with dementia. And I'm reminded of the statement, you meet one person with dementia, you meet one person with dementia. Well, I guess you read one book about dementia and you've read one book about dementia, because they're all unique and they're all different. As we've heard today, all those books that have been spoken about have been written in different ways. And also I'm reminded of the fact that Tom Kitwood is looking down upon us, I guess, from on high. And I just wonder at times what he would be thinking. He sadly passed away, those who don't know it, in 1998. And his seminal text, the Dementia Reconsidered book, that is still the go-to book for people, was published in 1997. And that has inspired many people since then. I just wonder what he would think, hearing what's been said today and reading what's been spoken about that's been written. Interesting thought to hand over to Nigel with, who I believe is going to take the questions and answers, the comments, but also maybe say something that he has written as well.
There's oodles of questions here that have come in. We may not have time to deal with them all. Peter Clark asks you a direct question, Jennifer. Do you have any tips in getting people with advanced dementia to talk?
Yes, well, that could take a long time, but I'll do a quick answer. There's a lot about it in my book. My website has quite a lot about it, gloriousopportunity.org, and there's a leaflet on my website on the subject, which you can download yourself.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hilary Dawson asks, all of you, do you think professionals in training should be herded towards books written by people with dementia? Do you see as, yeah?
Yes.
Take the nodding heads, absolutely. Right.
Answer.
Absolutely. I've got one question of my own, unsurprisingly. Dementia is a very difficult subject because of the nuances of dementia, the good day, bad day. Where do you get your inspiration? How do you portray that in your writings? Anybody?
Jennifer and Peter would like to take that question first.
I was writing my website in the chat.
Okay.
I don't hear the question.
And Peter,
What was the question
what inspires
again?
you?
What was the question again? Sorry.
Inspires you to want to write?
Oh, well, yes, that's easy. To help other people.
For me, on Peter's behalf, it's twofold. It is, as I said, something I wanted to do, but for Peter, it's to get his story out there, to give other people hope, and to show, as he often says, life isn't over. And I think using Peter's really powerful language, which as soon as he says it, has forgotten it. I've captured that language, and I think that will hopefully give people some optimism.
Hope is one of those very small words with such a vast, big meaning to a lot of people, and that's the word that I think we should use more. Hope.
Yeah.
I agree. That's why I say it's a word of hope. We can live well.
Yes.
And I think all three of us within our books have not looked at it through rose-tinted spectacles either. We've been very honest and very open and very balanced in trying to say to people who read the books, it's not an easy journey, this one with dementia, but it is possible with support and that degree of positivity to live as well as possible.
Thank you. And what themes and messages do you give do you hope to convey in your readers through your writing about dementia? Anybody want to go? What? I mean, it's a big question.
Yeah,
Well,
I
it
think it
said
links
how
maybe
to
to
live
what's
well,
previously
and
said.
that there is possibility of slowing down the progression. Even there is hope. We don't have to curl up in a ball and die, so to speak. There is hope, and we walk together with it. Sorry, Keith, I interrupted you.
No, you didn't at all. And I think also to challenge preconceived ideas about dementia that people have, understandably so, because I had them. And I dare say Peter had them before he was diagnosed. Jennifer possibly less so because of her medical background. But we certainly thought that dementia was just the remit of the older people over the age of 75. And it was solely the late stages, not realizing that there was a beginning, a middle, and an end to this journey.
Yeah.
Like
And Jan.
Jennifer just said about slowing the progression down, we were all given a life expectancy at our diagnosis. And I'm a great believer in that we are responsible for ourselves, and having the right attitude to this condition, we can't cure it, but we can, I believe, slow it down drastically. And I think that all of us here and many other people in our situations have proven that to be the case.
Absolutely. Jan and then Kathy.
I was also thinking about the importance of empathy, because, you know, it can be frustrating passing on information, and you don't know whether people take that in and act on it. But when they read a personal account and they identify with the person who's writing, like we do when we read personal accounts, I think it gives people, you know, that sense of empathy. This could be me struggling with this. This could be my friend. And I think that emotional shift makes all the difference when it's health and care professionals reading those accounts.
Very true. Kathy?
Yeah, I think that one of the ways that that I derive hope, and that the research from Ideal has taught me to have even more hope, is when we look at dementia in the context of somebody's life, their whole life. So the temptation is always to fall into the trap of the medical model and look just at dementia by itself and, you know, oh, what can we do about these dementia specific symptoms? And the answer at the moment is always going to be very little. But what we know is that all of the different aspects of the environment of your whole life, so your social relationships and where you live, if you're happy in your house, if your mood is good, all of those things actually make a difference to managing your life with dementia and how you feel about it. And we can do something about those. So I think there's hope by looking broader. And if we look at life instead of dementia, it gives you a lot more opportunity and room for maneuver.
Back to you, Nigel, to bring the webinar to a
Well, can I thank
conclusion.
all our participants? It's been fantastic, and everybody that's actually turned up and to listen to this. Thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart. This week is a sad week for all of us. Somebody who we rated highly, we say goodbye to. And in a memory, the Three Nations would like this poem read at the end of this session. So that's what I'll do. In the quiet hush of twilight's embrace, we bid farewell to a soul of grace. Wendy Mitchell, with a spirit so bright, now she takes her leave into the night. Though tears may fall and hearts may ache, her memory we'll forever make. For in her laughter and in her smile, we find comfort for peace for a while. She touched our lives with love so pure, a beacon of hope that will endure. Though she may be gone from sight, her essence lives in the light. So let us gather hand in hand to honour Wendy, to make a stand. For in her passing we find the key to cherish each moment, to love freely. As she journeys to the stars above, she leaves behind a legacy of love. Rest in peace, dear Wendy, forevermore. In our hearts, you'll live on forevermore. Rest in peace, Wendy. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We stop now at that stage. Thank you all for participating.